Hello, my name is Gary Lee, and welcome to the third episode of Racing Against Time, a brief history of the wristwatch revolution. In this episode we look at the Hamilton Watch Company and its amazing Hamilton Electric Watch. The year is 1957, a year of exciting change. The launch of the first artificial satellite, Sputnik. A young Elvis Presley starring in Jailhouse Rock. And of course the rise to fame, fortune and power of Mr. Entertainment himself, Harold Macmillan. But for wristwatch fans, the real news of the year is the release to market in January of a new type of watch, a revolutionary device driven not by mechanical energy from an uncoiling mainspring, but electrical energy from a button power cell. That watch is the Hamilton Electric, built around the all-new Hamilton 500 movement. Although another US company, Elgin, cooperating with the French watch manufacturer Lip, had announced and demonstrated an electric wristwatch prototype as early as 1952, they have lost the race to market. The Hamilton Electric Watch is initially made available in two case designs. The first, the Hamilton Van Horn, is a fairly conventional round case design named after Hamilton's Director of Research and Development, Dr. John Van Horn. The second is the Ventura, a futuristic curved triangle designed by legendary industrial designer Richard R. Beebe. The Hamilton Electric Watch was the result of over 5 years of solid research and development effort, and was supposed to put the company both light years ahead of the competition and well into fat profit margins. As we'll see, it didn't turn out quite like that. Created by the merger of several earlier watch companies, Hamilton Watch Company was established in 1892 at its main factory and corporate HQ in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Previously profiting from a range of products including railroad chronometers, Hamilton had to convert to military production during World War II. Like other US watchmakers, Hamilton came out of the war into a much harder trading environment. Thanks to Switzerland's advances in machine tooling and continued civilian production during wartime, Swiss watchmakers had rapidly gobbled up US market share. Then, in 1949, the unthinkable happened. The Waltham Watch Company, a pillar of American watch production for nearly a century, went bankrupt. Waltham had simply failed to keep pace with developments in wristwatches, and its business had declined accordingly. Although eventually salvaged, Waltham's problems were a stark warning to US producers. But a 1951 Senate inquiry into US watchmaking failed to reach any firm answers as to what to do. Although the idea of expanding trade tariffs was considered, some US companies, including another Hamilton rival Bulliver, already had partnerships with Swiss companies or had manufacturing facilities in Switzerland itself. The alternative, the solution, was to compete through technical innovation, but as is the case today, this was both a costly and a risky path to pursue. By 1951, in addition to dealing with the fallout from the Swiss invasion and the Waltham collapse, Hamilton's management were also hearing rumours about the Elgin Lip project. So they sifted through their R&D portfolio for options. A flurry of company memos and reports examined by René Rondeau, Hamilton Electric expert and author of the leading history, The Watch of the Future, all pointed to the possibilities of small electronic oscillators based on electromechanical tuning forks or even piezoelectric quartz crystals, as seen in some existing laboratory and telecoms equipment. The problem with building these oscillators would be that they required a large and steady supply of cheap, small transistors, reliable ones at that, something which could not be guaranteed in the early 1950s. As a result, by 1955, Hamilton engineers had instead developed a non-transistorized electric movement. Production started in 1956, and the Hamilton Electric Wristwatch was released to market in 1957, as noted. As a fashion side note, the Ventura model has become even more sought after, as Elvis once wore one on screen in Blue Hawaii. Before we look at the electric, however, let's take a quick recap of things from episodes 1 and 2 by looking inside a typical Hamilton mechanical wristwatch of the time. Here for your delight is a Hamilton Trent as sold from 1955 onwards. This model would have cost you $75 back in the day, so around $720 in today's money. Although small by today's standards, it was designed for men and was a popular model for Hamilton over its 14-year production run. This variant, bought in as new condition, has a 10K white gold filled case with black painted sterling silver dial and 14K yellow gold on the indices, numerals and hands. The second picture coming up is from my spares donor watch, another Hamilton trend, and shows the Hamilton 770 movement, a little gem with its bridgework fully dam-schemed, known as Geneva stripe on European watches. And in build terms, this movement was compared favourably to similar Patek Philippe movements of the era. A little tip here, another Hamilton gem to look out for is the 982M movement, a slightly earlier 19 jewel set in watches from 1940 to 1951. If we look at the 770, we see it has a separate second complication under the main hands. It's a 22 jewel unit, fairly typically for the period. The oscillator here, remember, that is essentially the balance wheel and hairspring assembly and surrounding subassembly, runs at a frequency of 18,000 bph, so 5 beats per second, or 2.5 Hz if you prefer. It's a manual wind and has a power reserve of approximately 45 hours. Let's turn now to the electric wristwatch. To change a wristwatch design from basic mechanical to basic electric, let's think again about the 4 building blocks we first encountered in episode 2. The design approach here is to remove the first 2 blocks, i.e. the power source comprising mainspring, winding and power wheel train, and the oscillator comprising the balance wheel and hairspring assembly and related subassemblies. Then replace those missing blocks with a power cell, leads and contact switching, and a modified balance wheel assembly fitted with, first of all, an electromagnet system based on moving coils in the Hamilton watches, fixed coils in others like the Elgin, and a so-called index wheel, contact wheel and contact subassembly which is designed to open and close the contact switch for the electromagnet. So actually then, an electric watch is an electromechanical watch, a hybrid. How does it all work? Well, with the battery installed, current flows through the leads and the contact switch, which is closed by default, and so the electromagnet switches on. This electromagnet is magnetically attracted to permanent magnets on the balance wheel, and this creates motion, the magnet movement referred to there, swinging the balance wheel one way and tightening up the hairspring as it goes. But that same motion, transferred through the index wheel and subassembly, eventually forces the contact switch open, and so the electromagnet switches off at the point open contact. At this point, the coiled hairspring starts to unwind, and so pushes the balance wheel back the other way. This reverse motion eventually closes the contact switch, and then the whole cycle starts all over again. And there you have your steady beat. Beyond the oscillator, a basic electric watch, the counter and display box stay much the same as in a mechanical. As to accuracy, well, electric wristwatches are somewhat more accurate than typical mechanical because, except right at the end of a power cell's life, there's less variation in power delivery from the power cell compared to the mainspring winding down. Now let's look at an actual example of the Hamilton Electric. It's a nice tidy Hamilton Polaris, a model manufactured between 1960 and 65. This model has a design made in-house, oval and bow, in solid 14K yellow gold for the case and the back. Originally it would have cost around $150, around $880 in today's money. But it was purchased for me than less than gold scrap value from an estate sale, a good place to pick up a bargain. Again, it's a small watch by today's standards. It was originally designed for men but would fit anyone today. When we look inside, what do we see? We see a Hamilton 505 movement, a second generation Hamilton Electric movement that dates this watch to 1961 onwards. And here we can see, if we look, the round battery slot and clip at the top left. We can see the power leads running across there, roughly outlined, running from the clip. We can see the modified balance assembly, bottom center left, and we can see coil housing around that. Note that even with Union Carbide, the major battery manufacturer of the day, as co-developer, the power cell took nearly as long as the watch to develop and put into production. The Hamilton Electric Watch sold well, but several sets of problems emerged, as noted by René Rondeau. Initially, there were production problems with delamination of surfaces and parts not meeting specification. But many of the ongoing issues were not so much with the watch itself, but more to do with the company's cost control. First, in order to ensure customer confidence, Hamilton had put in place a scheme allowing direct return to factory for servicing of the watches and the movements. But with delayed introduction of training and a lack of confidence on the part of jewellers to deal with the movements, many retail jewellers also used it to return watches for relatively minor things like battery changes. Employing extra staff to cope with all of this cut into Hamilton's profit margins, and although nowhere near as unreliable as sometimes reported, it also turned out that the original Hamilton 500 movement was somewhat fussy regarding contact replacement and other servicing tasks. That increased factory costs still further. Various attempts to improve the robustness of the movement led to the 500A variant and eventually to the Hamilton 505, but only with extra research and development cost. To cap it all, in 1960, rival Bulova announced a more technically advanced and accurate watch based on the electromechanical tuning fork oscillator, the neatly named Accutron. The growing sales of Accutron and the aerospace application of Bulova's technology, examined in the next episode, began to bite into Hamilton Electric's cutting-edge status. But what about Elgin? Even worse off. Ironically, having sparked much of the fuss and panic at Hamilton HQ, it did not manage to get its electric watch to the market until 1962, and even then ended up with a product with a 90% plus recall rate, creating an even bigger reputational and financial headache. Despite the cost and competition pressures, Hamilton soldiered on, even commissioning the R&D that led to the first all-electronic LED display quartz wristwatch, the Pulsar Time Computer, launched to market in 1972 by Time Computer Incorporated. But ultimately, the company had to bow to commercial reality. Only 1 year after Elgin, in 1969, Hamilton had to cease watch manufacture in the US. Subsequently, during the 1970s and 1980s, under further pressure from sales of the very self-same quartz products it had helped to unleash on the world, the Hamilton Group companies and brands were split, reorganized, and sold off. So today, while Hamilton still exists as a watch brand, it's now owned by the Swiss conglomerate Swatch Group, and Hamilton wristwatches are all manufactured in Switzerland. Well, that's it for this time, but in the next episode we look at Bulova and the Accutron, the marvellous wristwatch with the musical tone. Thank you very much.